You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hello, world, and welcome to Tales from Hollywoodland, a veritable feast of movies, television, Broadway, showbiz stories, news and gossip, with Julian Schlossberg, Arthur E. Friedman, and Stephen J. Rubin. Today we're looking at great heist movies. And now, here's Steve.
Hey guys, this is going to be a fun day. I was going through the heist movies over the years, and there's a literal ton of them. I have to start by mentioning a movie I saw when I was 9, and I've mentioned on the show before because we've mentioned various things about it. But Ocean's 11, 1960. There are a bunch before then, and we'll talk about them. But I went to Las Vegas for the first time that year. My parents took me. We stayed at the Sands Hotel on the Strip. And I remember looking up at the billboard, and I think it said Frank Sinatra. So this was probably about the time they had made the movie. And I had already seen it. So that was a fun movie. Are you a fan, Julian?
Oh, yeah. I really was. And it was great at that time. I don't really think it stands up terrifically for me now, but at the time, I did like it a lot. But, you know, I love the Asphalt Jungle. And to me, I was trying to think if there was another movie before 1950 when Huston made that film. And I can't think of too many before it that were heist films, or at least with that in the theme. It's a very interesting thing. We talked about Marilyn Monroe on our show, and she made an incredible impression in that film. But she wasn't the original person that John Huston wanted. He wanted Lola Albright. He wanted Lola Albright for the blonde, and we got to know Lola Albright in the Peter Gunn series as the girlfriend. But Lola Albright wasn't available, and he cast Marilyn Monroe. And they didn't want, MGM, Louis B. Mayer did not want to make the Asphalt Jungle. But at that point, Dory Sherry had been brought in as head of production. And he and Louis B. Mayer had a terrible fight for a long time. And finally, they got rid of, Louis B. Mayer supposedly quit. But he quit because Dory Sherry had taken over. But he was against it, but Dory wanted it, and it got made. And
but Dory did not want Sterling Hayden. John Huston had to fight for Sterling Hayden. In 1950, Sterling Hayden was fairly unknown. I'm trying to think. He did The Killers later, Julian? Was that?
The Killing was later.
The Killing was later. But
yeah.
Sterling Hayden, as I recall from my history, Sterling Hayden had an interesting life. I believe he was a member of the OSS during World War II. He worked for Donovan, and I think he had some action overseas. I don't think he was a frogman, but he was a very physical guy. And of course, I always remember him as Jim Bowie in The Last Command, one of his great roles later. But as Dix Handley in The Asphalt Jungle, he's just terrific.
He really is. And it's a great cast of Louis Calhern and Sam Jaffe and James Whitmore and Gene Hagen, who we talked about in Singing in the Rain, of course.
Right.
So it was and I think Arthur, I was saying, I think it may be the first heist movie that I remember. I wonder if there was one done before that. Do you guys know?
I think heist movies are a great genre because there are so many really, really good heist movies. The Killing was made in the mid-50s.
56.
Was early 50s, I believe.
50 for Asphalt, 56 for The Killing.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a great heist movie pre-1950. I will say this. The Killing is, pound for pound, one of the all-time great movies. Little black and white movie, Stanley Kubrick. A man who I loved very much named Max Youngstein, who was one of the original United artists who took over for Mary Pickford and Charlie Chaplin. Max Youngstein was the head of production. and marketing at the New United Artists as of about 1950, I believe. And Max was pitched by Stanley Kubrick and Stanley's partner, I think James Harris or something. Thank you.
Yep.
And Max greenlit that movie very inexpensive, less than $1 million, The Killing. But he made a gem. And there are so many of these little black and white gems that we know of. But here's The Killing, a great heist movie. They're going to rob a track. They put it together. Elisha Cook. They had these great faces. Sterling Hayden. Marie Windsor, I believe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Alicia Cook, Timothy Carey, Vince Edwards, Teddy Corsica, J.C. Flippin. Every B movie actor that ever was
fantastic. And
it was amazing.
The ending of that movie is one of the great endings. When they're wheeling the money through the airport, and it opens up, the valise opens up, which is reminiscent, by the way, guys, of a story of corruption in New York when Mayor William O'Dwyer took over in the late 40s as the mayor of New York. Prior to that, he was the police commissioner, and he used to get paid off as police commissioner. So now he becomes the mayor, and he calls the police commissioner as the mayor and says, look, from now on, the buck stops here. You go take it one more step to the mayor's office. Well, what would happen is that he'd give the cash that he would take in the mayor's office to his brother, Bill O'Dwyer, who would take the cash in a valise through Grand Central Station down to banks in Philadelphia. And one day, the valise opened up in the middle of Grand Central Station. All this money, thousands of dollars were flying all over Grand Central Station, similar to the ending of The Killing. By the way, Bill O'Dwyer, the mayor's brother, was arrested. And Mayor O'Dwyer, who lost the mayorship because of that scandal, was appointed by Harry S. Truman as the ambassador to Mexico. So there's corruption, it happens all over the place. The Killing was a fantastic movie. Elisha Cook, got to tell you, a dear friend of mine who loves movies, we always laugh about the fact that Elisha Cook in this movie is so pathetic as the husband to this kind of, slutty-like woman. And she says, I can't stand you. You're this, you're terrible. But he would always say, but you like me, don't you? You like me, with that face, And she says, I like your friend better. I like your friend. He's terrific. And he says, but I introduced you to him. Don't you like me for that? Watch The Killing and you'll see it. I think it was on TCM last night. A lot of great movies, guys, from this genre. You mentioned one, of course, Asphalt Jungle. Marilyn Monroe, as sexy as she was, and everything else she ever did was never sexier than in that little 2-minute piece that she did. Would you agree, Julian?
Oh, she was fantastic in that. Yeah. There was no question. Quentin Tarantino, speaking of The Killing, said he was very influenced by that movie for Reservoir Dogs. And the other movie that he was influenced by in Reservoir Dogs was The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, the original. The one with Walter Matthau.
Great movie.
Terrific film. Yeah. And if you remember in that movie, they were calling each other Mr. Green, Mr. Brown, Mr. Red.
Yes.
And he totally took that from...
Who was the director of Pelham 1, 2, 3, guys?
Joseph Sargent.
Oh, what a movie. The sneeze thing, perfect.
Really good.
My friend Steve Mitchell, who's a student of New York-based movies, says it's the quintessential New York movie, because one of my favorite characters is the big fat transit guy, Saul. I think it's Dolowitz, who has to go down, and he's not going to let anybody stop him, and he goes down, and they machine gun him. Saul, fat Saul.
Well, there he goes. But they did, you think they're going to remake that movie, and they get two interesting actors, Denzel Washington and who's the bad guy, but John Travolta. It was a turkey. Any good.
Remakes generally are, Julian. Remakes.
As much as I love Denzel, he's been in some turkey remakes. Remakes are generally awful, but
I'd like to talk about one that I thought was terrific. The only time I can remember a heist movie that was better the second time.
Okay.
And that was the Thomas Crown Affair.
Oh.
I thought the second one with Pierce Brosnan and Rene Russo, terrific. And even though I love Steve McQueen, I love Faye Dunaway, that movie is tough to sit through.
But did you love Paul Burke?
And Paul Burke is terrific. Yeah, he's really good
I'll
too.
tell you a story, guys. So I'm at United Artists in 1968. I get there as the branch manager, first young branch manager in Boston. And they had shot the Thomas Crown Affair in Boston and the area the year before. So when I get there, there's the world premiere of the Thomas Crown Affair. I'm about to meet Steve McQueen and Paul Burke, who could not do anything on promo television because he would throw up in front of a live camera. So he was X'd out. Faye Dunaway wasn't there. Steve McQueen didn't want to go out and do anything for PR. So we were left with Jack Weston came up to me and said, "I'll do anything. Just keep feeding me boots. If you keep feeding me, I'll do anything. I'll do anything." Saw the screening of the movie, of course, before it opened in the premiere. What disturbed me mostly about the Thomas Crown Affair, and I love Norman Jewison's work, and the Russians are coming, and so much of the stuff that he did. Norman was a great director, Moonstruck, my God. But what he did was he used that, I think it was a Czechoslovakian thing with they split the screen all over the place.
Yeah.
I hated that, and so did the audience. They hated it. They were just disconcerted by the whole thing. But the concept of Thomas Crown Affair was fantastic. The robbery when the guys didn't know each other. What's his name? Yaphet Kotto?
Yep.
Yaphet Kotto.
Yep.
A friend of mine who's a producer produced a Homicide on the Streets years later said, with Yaphet Kotto, he can only do one line at a time. He doesn't remember beyond one line. So if you only shoot one line. Well, this was years before, of course, in Thomas Crown. Thomas Crown to me was good. Great song. It was really nice. I mean, it was Boston at a time when Back Bay was kind of being rebuilt in 1968. But what I can convey to you guys and to our listeners is the world premiere of the Thomas Crown Affair was in Boston. There I was in the middle of it. And Steve McQueen, we were on a boat in the Boston Harbor with all of the press, and everybody was on this yacht, and it was a glorious kind of a thing. And some of our key people from New York who were in public relations and publicity were just not able to be there. A couple were sick. One was in Europe. And so we had the guy who was there came over to me and he said, "Look, McQueen won't do anything. He will not come out and interview. Maybe because you're young." I was like 27 at the time. Maybe if you go and speak to him, he's sitting in the galley. I walk in to see Steve McQueen. Sitting in the galley in some kind of a seersucker suit. His wife was not there at that time. She was somewhere outside. And there was, hundreds of people on this yacht. And here I am sitting with Steve McQueen, and he says, "Look, I'm not going to do anything, okay? I don't want to do it. I can't do it. I'm not up to it. I don't want to." He was kind of moody. Frail guy, great movie star. And I said to Steve, "My wife and I are planning to have a baby. I'm new at this job. Could you please do 10 minutes? I mean, come on. It would be good for me and my wife and the new baby." And he looked at me, he said, "I'll do it. Sure, I'll do that." And he did. He got up, he went out. He was actually out there for about a half hour. He was great. He was great. Cut to, years later, I'm having lunch with Sumner Redstone in the Beverly Wilshire Hotel poolside, which is, I think, on the 3rd or 4th floor. And I see a guy who's very fat with a beard. And I look at him about 50 yards away, and I think, that still looks like Steve McQueen. It was. I go up over to him. "Steve, that's you?" He looks up and he says, "Yeah, what do you want?" I said, "Boston, Thomas Crown Affair. You're in the galley." And he looked up at me and said, this is 10 years later, he said, "Did you have a boy or a girl?" Great story, true story, guys. It's in my book.
Well, Steve was notorious for not wanting to talk to adults. I had the experience, and I've said it many times on our show, where he asked me for directions once. I was a little kid on a bicycle. I was 12. I had just seen The Great Escape, but I think he was uneducated. He was not a book reader. He didn't want to embarrass himself. In fact, he was known in looking at screenplays of just cutting out pages of dialogue. He did not want to talk that much. If you look at his movies post The Great Escape, Bullet and Thomas Crown Affair, he's not going to be talking a lot.
I want to go back to Thomas Crown. I hear what you guys are saying. I don't necessarily agree, by the way, with Rene Russo, who was topless in the second one. But Thomas Crown Affair is a better movie than what hurt that movie badly was those split screens jumping up and down all over the place. I don't know why they did it, but he did it. But it still stands up pretty well. I mean, really,
it's funny you should mention. It's funny you should mention that, Arthur, because 2 years later, George Seaton makes Airport for Universal, which, as you know, was a huge hit that year, and that also used that split screen format.
And they had a huge book, So what do you do?
It was a whole period of time, that period, where that was supposedly the in thing to do. You got to remember that we grew up with old movies that started with credits. They had lots of credits before the movies started. And then all of a sudden, it changed. And why did it change? For television. They found that people would change the channel rather than wait for the movie to start. And so that's how credits became very, very small. In some cases, just the title was shown and credits were at the end. Speaking of Boston, there's a little movie that I don't think you guys will definitely know. I wonder how many of the people listening knows, called The Friends of Eddie Coyle.
Bob Mitchum.
Robert Mitchum.
Peter Boyle, directed by Peter Yates, and one of the most realistic films about crime you'll ever see. Very, very interesting.
Good movie, Julian. Good movie. So great. It was in color, I believe, but it almost seemed like it was black and white.
Yeah, it was color, but you're right.
It was color.
You're right.
I want to mention a movie here that Steve and I are involved in a movie project with a guy named David Ward. David Ward was a young writer, came out of USC Film School, and wrote a little script. His first script was called The Sting, Sting. And David Ward wound up having that made with Paul Newman and Robert Redford, one of the greatest movies of all time, let alone one of the great heist movies. But Steve and I have gotten to know David pretty well. He's a terrific guy, and to this day, he's done a lot of good stuff. He's one of the writers on Sleepless in Seattle, one of the writers, certainly a writer, a producer, directed on Major League. He made a fortune with that. So David's been a great,
don't forget he won the Academy Award that year for Best Original Screenplay for The Sting.
For The Sting, which it was. It was executed so well by George Roy Hill. And it was a great movie. What a heist movie! Come on, what a film! The Sting. Well, number one doesn't like The Sting.
Number one heist movie for me. Number one. I don't care. I can't think of a better one. But interesting, Jack Nicholson was originally offered the lead in The Sting.
Really?
And he turned it down because he was going to be doing two Bob Towne scripts, Chinatown and The Last Detail. So he knew his scripts pretty well, Jack.
David told us, Julian, while they were rehearsing The Sting, and David at the time was like 22, 23 years old. I mean, talk about a lucky thing. Guy writes his first script is The Sting. And he sees it in rehearsal. He goes over to Roy Hill, George Hill, the director, and says, I don't believe this, but Paul Newman looks like he's just phoning it in. It's like a joke. Is he taking this seriously? And he said, look, David, you're a young guy. When the light goes on, watch Paul Newman, okay? You'll see. And of course, the light went on. They action, roll him, and Paul Newman was Paul Newman. David tells a lot of great stories about The Sting. I will say this. With an audience, it never got better. You saw that with an audience. You talk about a movie. The Sting was fantastic. Redford, never better. Paul Newman, never better.
How about Robert Shaw? One of the great villains. And Robert Shaw called George Roy Hill. He told me this, Shaw, and said to him, look, I've hurt my leg in handball. I don't think I can do the movie. And George Roy Hill said, well, can you walk? He said, yeah. I said, well, let's use the limp. And that's how the limp got
great. It was great.
The same thing happened to Burt Lancaster in The Train. He was playing tennis and hurt his leg, and all of a sudden his character starts limping. No, it's very, very
Steve,
true.
The Train, one of the great underrated movies
of all
ever.
time.
On no lists, it doesn't appear. John Frankenheimer.
And technically we could kind of call The Train a heist movie because they've got to save all the artworks of France on this train.
Movie. Holy
but it's a great movie. But I was
to add to that, just so you know, Barry Levinson told me that the movie that inspired him more than anything to want to become a director was The Train.
Really?
Yeah,
that's interesting. The original director was Arthur Penn. And Lancaster was not getting along with him, nor was Penn with Lancaster. And he had done, what was it, The Young Savages with Frankenheimer?
Right.
Yeah, and he wanted him in, and Burt Lancaster got what he wanted.
But, Steve's right. When you talk about The Train, maybe you don't think about a heist. But that was based on a true story. They were trying to take all the artwork out of France back to Germany,
right,
on this train. If people listening to this have not seen The Train, find a way to see it. Fantastic movie.
The thing that's very cool about The Sting, which is true of a lot of the heist movies, it gives you opportunities for character actors to fill in all these cool little parts, because there's always a team coming together to take the heist. And of course, it was true in the Asphalt Jungle. In fact, I interviewed W.R. Burnett once. It was for my story on The Great Escape, because he co-wrote The Great Escape later on. Burnett's strength as a writer was working with an ensemble of characters, which of course Asphalt Jungle is.
But on the Sting, there's this extra added ingredient that was not there when it all came to be, and was added with Marvin Hamlisch adapting the Scott Joplin score.
Oh, sure.
He threw that in as an element. My God, I mean, that's one of the fun movies of all time. I remember I got it on a split of all things. Somebody took, I swear to God, somebody took Pete and Tilly in a split over The Sting.
Now, what does that mean in your parlance? What is
that
this?
means? That means that you sit down and split movies in a town. The town, I think, was Burlington, Vermont. And you column A and column B. So who's going to take column A? Who's going to take column B? You sit there. It's like a crazy game.
We should add that it's illegal.
Well, it was illegal, and not really. It was de facto illegal in those days, because they wanted you to bid.
It was illegal, but we all did it.
We all did it. And so what happens is somebody chooses one of the theaters in the town, takes Pete and Tilly, and I had seen The Sting. I'm taking The Sting. Played in Burlington, I think, for 47 weeks.
I heard it's still playing.
Yeah, it's incredible. It was a great long-run movie.
Well, three years before The Sting, and I'm going to switch genres, but not switch heists, you have the great war movie, semi-comic, called Kelly's Heroes, with Clint Eastwood, Telly Savalas, Don Rickles.
Loved it.
This is a heist movie, but set during the war. And
Donald Sutherland,
the late Donald Sutherland, we just lost. But the basic setup is they discover there's a bunch of German gold sitting in a bank 20 miles behind the lines, and Clint Eastwood decides he's Kelly, he's a lieutenant, and he's going to put a team together to find this gold.
And they do.
Well, some of the books that you read claim that the first real heist movie was the foreign movie Rififi, which we know right off the bat that Asphalt Jungle was 5 years ahead of it. So that's an incorrect statement. But Rififi has got something that no movie, I don't think's ever done. It must have been a full 30 minutes of no dialogue, no music, just watching them try to rob the bank. Incredible.
Oh, great movie, Julian. That was a great movie.
I'm fascinated with the fact that you know how to pronounce it.
Rififi.
I also tell you what it means. I bet you guys don't know.
We don't know. Tell us.
It means a fight or a brawl.
Oh.
My day is made. I never knew that. I never knew. Now, here's the thing, guys. I go to work for United Artists in the 60s, and we had a little heist movie, and those are the days of United Artists just having hits and hits and hits. I don't think any studio has ever been able to accomplish what United Artists did in the late 50s into the 60s with the Academy Awards, Tom Jones, Lilies of the Field, Midnight Cowboy. I mean, my God, it was incredible. We had a movie, guys. Again, one of these little movies that is a great, great movie in any genre, but one of the great genre movies of heist called Topkapi. Anybody see Topkapi?
Same director of Rifafi, Jules Dassin.
I
Same
didn't
director.
know that. Julian, I didn't know that, honest to God.
Yeah.
Wasn't Jules Dassin blacklisted during that era?
Yes, that's why he was making Rifafi in France. He was blacklisted, sadly turned in by his fellow director, Edward Dmytryk, who named him. And but he went there, and he went to Europe, and he ended up marrying Melina Mercouri.
Yeah, who was in the movie, of course.
Who, of course, they did Never on Sunday. But the big thing was Topkapi. And by the
When
way,
you were at Walter Reed in New York, Julian, did you know that Jules Dassin's brother, Sid Dassin, was one of the print guys in United Artists? If you needed a print, you called Sid Dassin.
I did not.
Hey, Sid, how's Julian? How's Jules? How is?
Yeah, well, they came on my show in New York, Melina Mercouri and Jules Dassin, and she was just what you thought she'd be. She was just an earthy, funny, had huge ring earrings, gigantic ring earrings on, and
she was very sexy, not very attractive,
not pretty,
very beautiful,
not pretty, but sexy.
Very
Absolutely.
Sexy. Julian, who stole the movie Topkapi? What actor?
Peter Ustinov.
Peter Ustinov, guys. Let me ask you, Michael, have you ever seen Topkapi?
Of course. Oh, Mike asked Mike, have you ever seen it?
Hello, Mike.
Hey, guys.
Have you seen Topkapi?
Of course.
Oh, you have seen. Okay.
Yes, it was a wonderful
Do you
film.
not agree with us?
I agree completely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It is a terrific movie. And Dassin, yes, made both of them. Topkapi, by the way, means it was a palace in Istanbul, in Turkey. And Topkapi means cannon run, not cannonball run, but cannon thing. But it was a huge, huge, beautiful palace in Istanbul.
If anybody sees that movie today, they will enjoy it as much as if they saw it in 1964. That's how great it is. Julian, what was the big picture that Jules Dassin did? Did he do Never on Sunday?
He did. I think Never on Sunday, I believe. Yeah. But you know, guys, there's something to discuss that you might get a kick out of if you hadn't thought of it. There are comic heist movies, some great comic heist movies. I'm thinking of two of Woody Allen's, Take the Money and Run, and Small Time Crooks. I'm thinking of A Fish Called Wanda.
I was about to say Fish Called Wanda is right up there.
Right up there.
Amazing.
And then there's an early 50s movie that I grew up on called The Lavender Hill Mob with Alec Guinness, the timid bank clerk and his cohorts, including Stanley Holloway. Now, guys, who was Stanley Holloway?
My Fair Lady.
Alfred P. Doolittle in My Fair Lady.
How about Julian in Take the Money and Run, that little scene when Woody Allen goes up to rob the bank and the note says, I have a gun, and the girl says, the teller says, you have a gog?
What's a gub? She says, what's a gub?
What a moment. What a moment.
Hey, he grabs it and he points to it.
I want to go back, guys, to the Thomas Crown Affair, which was, an amazing thing for a world premiere in Boston and all that kind of stuff, being involved with Steve McQueen. But my partner, Roger Lockwood, and I got to meet a guy named Alan Trussman, who was a lawyer who wore dark glasses way before Jack Nicholson. And Alan Trussman was a lawyer who happened to write the Thomas Crown Affair as a hobby. He wrote it. So we got to meet him, and we had dinner with him, went lunch with him, I think, in the bank one time. And he was telling us his experience at it happened to be Warner Brothers, and how much he hated the studios because of the way they paid him the money, or didn't pay him, or held back, or what have you. Because he also then wrote on a yellow legal pad, when he got to know McQueen from Thomas Crown, he wrote he showed me the page. It's a one-page thing. Bullet on a yellow legal pad was one page, handwritten. Handed it to McQueen. McQueen said, I will do this movie. And he did. And, of course, became a huge hit. Now, Alan had to collect money. And Alan's words were, the people at the studios, and with the dark glasses and the suit, tall, he says, if you ever really want to get fucked over, do business with those studios. Mm-hmm. It was eerie. Really, Alan, is that bad?
I want to go back to Boston for a second, since we've mentioned Boston a few times. Ben Affleck, who we know as a very fine actor, has also become a terrific director. And of course, he was very much honored by the Academy for the movie Argo, which wasn't really a heist movie, but he did a movie called The Town, which is a terrific thriller about robbing. I think it's Fenway. Maybe it was one of the. Mike, you have to unmute yourself.
Of course, if I want to talk, I have to unmute myself because I talk to myself all the time, so it's okay. But yes, it was definitely the job. It was robbing Fenway Park.
Right.
Was the whole story. And they dressed as nuns, which was awesome.
Well, Jeremy Renner is the co-star, and he's such a great actor, a very gritty actor.
Casey Affleck in that too?
Casey Affleck, I don't think is in.
Casey Affleck is a terrific actor.
It's funny you should mention dressing up as nuns. I remember another heist movie a little earlier that called Point Break. And Point Break, I think they dress up as presidents. They have the president's masks in their.
Yep, that was Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze.
Patrick Swayze, exactly.
I got to meet Billy Friedman when he was doing the Brinks job in Boston, and I went over to the set. It was outdoors in South Boston, and Billy and I hit it off real fast. And they had nothing but trouble with the unions. They were shut down for a while because of the unions. They're very tough in Boston. So Billy told me that way. I think they're going to fucking kill me. I really do. I think they're looking to kill me. He was paranoid about it. But they were tough guys. They were all over the set. Alan Garfield Gruwitz. This was to me, it was a great bad movie.
Isn't Peter Falk in that movie?
Peter opens the movie. Yeah.
Peter Falk.
In a mask.
Yeah. The gang that couldn't shoot straight. A fabulous story that's been known for years and years, but it happened. They actually successful. This group of schmucks, so to speak, successfully pulled off this worldwide known robbery, the Brinks job, and that's of course what the movie is about. And the heavyset, the tall guy from Goodfellas and what have you. How could I forget his name, guys? Wonderful actor. His daughter became successful. Steve helped me. The Brinks job. He was. I don't know his name. Please forgive me. I will find it out.
We will look it up immediately.
Is that Paul Sorvino?
Paul Sorvino with his daughter Mira. Paul Sorvino was one of the guys. So it had a nice cast. So was Warren Oates. Maybe was that his name? He was
that was his name. I don't know if he was in the movie.
Again, I think he was.
He may have been. Yeah. I don't know.
But this is again a movie for our people who listen to us. If you haven't seen The Brinks Job, it's not a great movie, but it's a very good movie, and it's Billy Friedman, so it's a pretty good film. They had nothing but trouble getting that made, but they got it made, and that is certainly a heist movie. They heisted a bank in Boston.
Well, one of the more, I guess, we're kind of going on the older movies, which I guess most of us like better. But one of the more current movies was Michael Mann's movie. Not that it's brand new, but Heat, with both Pacino and De Niro.
It was on my list. Yep.
As one of the biggest, the most spectacular shootouts I've ever seen on a city street.
Also had a great performance by Val Kilmer in that movie, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he did.
Oh, yeah.
The other thing I think the biggest problem with that movie was that it was 3 hours.
Yes.
And that's kind of tough for an audience these days.
What do we think about Dog Day Afternoon, guys?
Terrific movie based on a true story.
Attica.
Yeah.
Another one I had on my list is both versions of The Italian Job.
Yes.
Were both great.
Michael Caine in the original.
They were. There was a little movie that David Mamet wrote and directed called The Spanish Prisoner.
Oh.
And it's a little interesting film. Campbell Scott and Steve Martin in a very straight role, Ben Gazzara, all about high-tech involvement and stealing things. But Mamet is always interesting in his writing and the dialogue, and The Spanish Prisoner was not a huge success, but it's an interesting film.
Well,
I'd like to go back to the master of suspense, Mr. Alfred Hitchcock.
Oh, I know where you're going.
And Cary Grant, Grace Kelly to Catch a Thief.
Yep.
To Catch a Thief, which kind of that's mid-50s, I think around 55. I mean, everybody looks terrific in that movie. I mean, Carey at his most charming, Grace Kelly at her most gorgeous. I mean, talk about a woman. She's being pictured with Carey against a fireworks display behind her, and I didn't watch any of the fireworks.
Well, there were plenty going on between the two of them.
But that's definitely a heist movie because he plays Roby, the
cat burglar.
The cat burglar.
Yeah.
I'd like also to go from going back to the war genre. We mentioned Kelly's Heroes, but George Clooney and Mark Wahlberg.
Three Kings.
A movie called Three Kings.
Yep.
Set during the Gulf War. And I thought that was also a terrific film in terms of how far people go to achieve their heists.
Yeah. Another really good film for me was The Usual Suspects.
Oh, wonderful film. Wonderful.
That was terrific. Just terrific. And what a cast in that one. Kevin Spacey, Chaz Palminteri, Gabriel Byrne, Kevin Pollak, Stephen Baldwin. Really terrific and very clever. A real ending that really surprised almost everyone. Very clever and exciting film. I will not reveal the ending.
Will make you ask, who is Kaiser Soze? Just remember that.
That's right.
It's pretty awesome, too, because, there's a couple others. You also had the movie National Treasure with Nicolas Cage. And that spawned a franchise, including a Disney TV show based off of it. And but they were going after historical artifacts, which is pretty cool and ties into a lot of the thing with the Masons and everything in American history. It was a fun film. And that's what you want.
It's such a fun movie. And in fact, I've been railing that we need more fun movies today. We'll talk about this next week when we talk about the state of Hollywood. But you're absolutely right, Mike. Nicolas Cage has to steal the Declaration of Independence, and it's with all the effects these days, they can really, when they talk about the details of a heist, he really gets into it. I think trying to remember the filmmaker, John Turteltaub was the filmmaker,
right.
And I think they really use all the tools to make that heist and understand what they actually have to do. And the blonde in it, who's also in the Tarantino movie Inglourious Bastards. I'm trying to remember her name.
While you're remembering, Steve, somebody mentioned Steve Martin before. I want to just bring something up for a second away from heist movies, but maybe I'm crazy. My wife, Barbara, and I the other night tried looking at a movie we had never seen called Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
Oh, such a wonderful film.
Loved it. I loved it.
Did everybody see? Was that a big hit?
Yes, it was.
I'm trying to recall.
It did well, and in fact, it was made into a Broadway musical.
I was about to say,
how did that do?
Julian would know that because
that did well as well. Yeah,
but Steve Martin and Michael Caine were just amazing in that film together.
Yeah, but Steve Martin was unbelievable. There's a scene in the gorgeous home right on the water where Michael Caine has this magnificent mansion, and Steve Martin's driving him crazy, wants to be with him, and finally Michael Caine says, "What is it you want?" And he jumps off Steve Martin. He says, "I want this. I want this. And I want this." He wants everything that Michael Caine has. Funny movie.
The actress I was trying to think of, Diane Kruger, who is
she's beautiful.
Beautiful, and she's German, and she's an amazing actress in those movies. And, of course, comes back in the sequel to National Treasure 2, which also.
How about Nicolas Cage's career, guys? Ever think somebody would have that kind of career? You think Nick Cage would have that career if you were going back to like early 1980s and Valley Girl as an example?
No, not at all.
Had one of the great careers in the history of the business.
He has, but he's also done a bunch of clunkers too.
Well, that's part of a career, but he's made a lot of movies.
Here's a filmmaker who makes a lot of heist movies. Let's talk about Guy Ritchie. and Guy Ritchie did, was it Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and then the follow-up, which was Snatch, which was an amazing heist movie. And it's great because you had, the plan to steal, and then you see from all different angles what could go wrong, and everything that goes wrong does in this. And also an amazing role by Brad Pitt in this movie.
What was the title of that film?
Snatch.
Oh, Snatch, yeah, of course.
And Brad Pitt, you actually need the subtitles on to understand what he is saying in this movie, because he's talking gypsy, which is his accent is so thick, and it's just awesome.
Redford did a movie called Sneakers. You remember that?
Oh, yeah. That was awesome.
Sure.
Had Sidney Poitier in it. It was great.
1988, a little film comes out with Bruce Willis called Die Hard, which I think you'd have to say is a heist movie, because they're trying to steal those bearer bonds. To this day, I'm not quite sure what a bearer bond is, and why after you've stolen it, it isn't discovered 2 minutes later that it exists and they can wipe it out. But there's a lot of action in Die Hard, which spawned a number of sequels. I frankly,
still think it's a Christmas movie, Steve. I'm sorry.
Well, it's a Christmas heist movie, Mike.
Okay.
But it was a breakthrough movie. It was one of those seminal movies. It took the action kind of movie to a whole different place when the world, as I've mentioned before, when the world market was exploding. And the world market, of course, loves action-adventure movies. Die Hard came on the scene, and Bruce Willis became a superstar.
Well, I think every one of the sequels is a form of a heist movie. Die Hard 2 takes place at the Denver airport. They're basically stealing the airport so this drug leader can land. Die Hard 3 takes place in New York City. They're stealing gold. Die Hard 4 takes place in Washington, D.C. They're stealing the digital grid so they can wipe out all these bank accounts. So, yes, Die Hard is definitely in that arena.
A movie that you mentioned earlier, Steve, one of my favorite movies, of course, is Ocean's 11, as you mentioned. And when you think about it, and I've heard Scorsese talk about it, and I agree with him, it's not so much the first half of the movie, it's the second half when you see Vegas as it was in 1959 when they shot it. And it's like a time capsule, is the way he describes it, and I completely agree. It's a time capsule of when Vegas was. To see Vegas today compared to what it was in those years, it's unconscionable. You don't know where to go with it.
You drive down Las Vegas Boulevard in 1959, you pull into the driveway of the Desert Inn, you're there. They had outdoor parking lots. In fact, every I remember it. I was there, and it's so much fun. The most, apparently, according to the behind the scenes notes on the Ocean's 11, everybody's so chummy, but there had been some major rifts in their relationship. Sinatra and Lawford got into a big fight over Kennedy, and then Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. had a falling out. In fact, Sammy was supposed to be in Never So Few, the war movie that practically introduced Steve McQueen as a major character, and Sammy didn't get that role. McQueen did.
Wow.
And then,
but I would beg you, I would not say that they had a falling out. I have familiarity there. They had no falling out.
Briefly,
they idolized Frank Sinatra. Yeah. They had a great relationship.
But there were times when they've had falling out.
But how about the plot of Ocean's 11, that they're going to steal the money from these casinos on New Year's Eve, put the money into the garbage cans. The garbage guy is Sammy, takes it to the garbage place, puts the money into the garbage. They're going to get it out of town, and finally they're going to get it out of town in the casket. What a great plot. Now,
when they announced that Jerry Weintraub was going to do a remake in the early 2000s, I said, oh, no, they're not going to remake it. I have to say that was one remake that actually is a lot of fun because of casting. Yeah. I mean, you got Matt Damon, you got Brad Pitt, you got Bernie Mac, you got
George Clooney.
Who?
Right, of course. Clooney. George Clooney, Danny Ocean, Julia Roberts. But I didn't think the Ocean's 12 was much, but I did like Ocean's 13 with Al Pacino. I thought that was kind of fun.
One day, as a subject, we should do movies that have great casts like this, all-star cast that died, and to show people there's no guarantees, because there are a bunch of movies like that.
The only guarantee is with a lot of names, they'll get the financing. That's the guarantee.
That's right.
That's the only thing. You start thinking about the movies we've been talking about, and almost everything is from the 50s on. Because if you think about it, most of these movies, the bad guys win. The thieves win often. You couldn't do that when there was a code. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised that even with The Killing, they had to lose the money. And that was 56.
Well,
so we, the audience, we go along with the bad guys often.
Oh, sure.
They're charming, they're fun, and they're fighting the so-called system.
Well, Leo DiCaprio, who of course has become a huge star, worked for Christopher Nolan on a movie called Inception, which takes the heist movie into a whole different dimension. You're actually stealing somebody's mind in a way. It's a little confusing at times, but I have to say visually, it's a stunning movie. Mike, what did you think of Inception?
Inception was interesting because it was on so many different levels, and Chris Nolan does that so perfectly. He has you going in thinking one thing, and then he turns the movie into something completely different. And every day now, since I've seen that movie, I'm looking for the spinning top. I really am.
Steve, when you said it was a little confusing, I have to raise you. It's a lot confusing for me.
It was great. Leonardo DiCaprio was great in that film, though.
Yeah,
he really was.
The Great Train Robbery. I believe there's a silent version of the Great Train Robbery, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely. It's with Billy Anderson.
But the 1970s version with Sean Connery and Donald Sutherland is a terrific heist movie filmed in Britain with a great Jerry Goldsmith music score that you can really collect on that one.
Where would you put Butch Cassidy's Sundance Kid?
Right up there.
Oh, right up there. Right up there.
Right up.
Completely.
Terrific. George Roy Hill did The Sting. George Roy Hill did Butch Cassidy.
With Redford and Paul Newman again. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was just amazing. What about, did you guys ever see, of course, Dog Day Afternoon?
Yeah, we had mentioned it. Pacino and Lumet directing and Charlie Durning. It's a very interesting cast. Carol Kane, Matthew Broderick's father, James Broderick, is in it. It's quite a cast and quite a movie. And based on a true story.
And Fredo.
And yes, John Casale and also Chris Sarandon. Very, very, very good cast and a damn good movie. Coming off, they're both of them, Pacino and Lumet, coming off Serpico. Next movie, I believe, was Dog Day Afternoon. They were on a roll.
Has there been a heist movie about a heist of a big steamship, a big cruiser?
Yes. I'll tell you what it was. It's not considered a very great movie, but it is a Frank Sinatra movie. It's called Assault on a Queen.
Right.
Written by Rod Serling, of all people. And it basically is about Sinatra and his partner team up with Verna Lisi and her boyfriend, Tony Franciosa, and they're going to raise an old German U-boat from the bottom of the ocean off Miami, and they're going to go try to heist the Queen Mary. It's a wild and wacky plot. Richard Conte is in it. Alf Kjellin, or however you pronounce his name, Kjellin, and good Nelson Riddle score. That was definitely a on-the-sea heist movie, Arthur.
Yeah, heist movies kind of get into every part of the world. We've done World War II. We've done obviously banks. What was the movie? What was the plot in Fun with Dick and Jane? How were they going to rob? What were they going to rob, guys? Jane Fonda.
Probably the studio's money.
It's been so long, Arthur. I don't remember that one.
You don't remember the movie Fun with Dick and Jane?
I know. I remember the name, but I don't.
Maybe George Segal was in it. Maybe.
Yeah.
It
was Jane Fonda, George Segal. I played it at the Coronet Theater. We did a lot of business in New York with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, there's a more modern movie I want to talk about real quick. Have you guys seen Baby Driver? Which was with Edgar Wright was the director, and had amazing performances by Jamie Foxx and John Hamm, and Kevin Spacey was in that also. And it was just...
What year was it made?
That was 2017.
Oh, 2017.
Yeah, that was recently. And who played the driver? I'm trying to remember.
I think his name was Ansel Elgort.
And Ansel Elgort, yes. I do remember that. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
Another one is the one with the magicians. Now you
see me. That was awesome. The first one was they didn't need to make a second or a third.
Of course, a money grab. And if by the way, if you're running through your streaming list and you come across a title called The Hurricane Heist, don't ignore it. There are not big names involved in it, but The Hurricane Heist is a heist movie set during a horrible hurricane. And the special effects, the digital effects these days, as we're seeing recently with this Twister remake, are just off the charts. And they combine it with a heist movie. It's called The Hurricane Heist.
Is it set in Miami?
I think it's set in the South, but I don't think it was Miami. It wasn't a big city.
When was it made, Steve?
Just recently. I would say within the last 2 years.
Really? You never heard
but
of it?
I enjoy it very much because, they're trying to stop this. I think they break into one of the treasury vaults with all the cash, and it's pretty crazy.
Is there such a thing as the greatest heist movie of all time?
Yes, it's called The Sting.
Yeah,
I wouldn't disagree with that, but I would also put up the Asphalt Jungle up there too.
Oh, it's a wonderful film, Asphalt Jungle.
And The Killing, these we discussed.
Yeah.
And absolutely Topkapi, strange title, didn't work in the favor of the movie. But if you ever saw the movie, it's a great film.
Miklos Rozsa, one of the great composers of all time, won an Oscar for Ben-Hur and so many epic movies, did the music for the Asphalt Jungle. And there's only 6 minutes of music in the whole movie. And I think John Huston obviously wasn't interested in distracting from the business of this heist. So they didn't enhance it with music, which is very unusual, I think, for movies these days.
Especially for 1950.
Right.
Especially for 1950.
Steve, who did the music for On the Waterfront?
Leonard Bernstein.
It was Bernstein, huh?
It was
Yep.
Leonard Bernstein.
Absolutely. And that's wall-to-wall music.
And pounding, heavy music. It worked perfectly.
Yeah, we were just watching TCM the other day. Eva Marie Saint had just celebrated her 100th birthday.
Good
Yes.
Lord.
Yeah,
Crazy,
she was terrific. And is she great with Cary Grant in North by Northwest? Oh, my.
Which has a little touch of heist in it because they've got to find the microfilm. But it's one of my all-time favorite movies. We'll have to do spy films one day because that definitely has to be on the list.
Can I come up with a little movie? That was a terrific movie.
Why not?
Heist, black and white, late 50s. The Odds Against Tomorrow. Harry Belafonte, Ed Begley. They go into a small town to rob a bank. A great movie, guys. Robert Wise directed it. Julian, Robert Wise.
Yeah, I remember that movie, Arthur. It was a good little movie. And it was Harry Belafonte at that point made The World, the Flesh, and the Devil, and then he made a movie called The Angel Levine, and then of course he teamed up with Portier, and he became a movie star.
He was a movie star. One of the best looking human beings that ever lived. You mentioned the other day about Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali with the key light.
Unbelievable.
Put Harry Belafonte right into that because he was that good looking.
It's true.
Yeah.
That W.R. Burnett, who a lot of movies of those kind of films were based on his credit as a book. He even wrote Little Caesar. I don't know if you guys know that, but yeah, Little Caesar.
And he was a crime specialist, definitely.
Yeah, and but it's interesting when you think about it. It's hard to come up, at least for me, with a couple of great heist movies in the last 10 or 20 years. It's just difficult. And yet we can go back to the 50s, 60s, and 70s and probably name 20, 30. So it's once again, I guess, as someone said, Steve or Arthur or Mike, we will talk about the new Hollywood and what's being made.
I think that the new Hollywood seems to be obsessed with franchise movies. And heist movies don't necessarily lend themselves to being franchise movies, although Mike mentioned the National Treasures, which were very heisty. I don't know. I think there are some. I was going through the list. There's a lot of heist movies that I haven't seen, which I wouldn't want. I had nothing to say.
Didn't Barry Levinson make one called Hot Fries or French Fries or something like that? Doesn't come to mind, huh?
No, it doesn't.
No.
No.
Name of somebody with Bruce Willis and a couple other people. I forget the title of the movie. I'm quite sure it was Heist.
Here, one movie we haven't mentioned is Bonnie and Clyde. I mean, talk about the most recognizable names in bank robbing throughout the 30s. And as we've talked about on this show before, when Bonnie and Clyde first came out, it was not successful.
No.
Well, it became successful. Did Scorsese ever do a heist movie? If he didn't, I'm surprised.
That's a good question. I mean, in Goodfellas.
Well, wait a second. The one with Ray Liotta is that whole thing is the heist.
Goodfellas.
Goodfellas, sure. They that's the big heist at the airport, the airline.
Yeah. A true story.
That's one hell of a movie. That's one hell of a movie.
Well, if we're going to talk about heist movies, then I have to mention a James Bond movie called Goldfinger, because obviously the object of the movie is to steal, to get into Fort Knox. In the original novel by Ian Fleming, the plot was to actually steal the gold out of Fort Knox. But as you know from the movie, they changed the plot around to be a little bit more modern.
Steve, you've mentioned franchise movies. That's the thing that's going on. It's nothing really new about it. But I want to personally guarantee you that if you were the head of a studio today, you would be making franchise movies. Because like Willie or Sutton once said, why do you rob banks? That's where the money is. Franchise movies is where the money is. And it's their action. They're, again, global. You wouldn't greenlight anything, just like the rest of the guys. They don't greenlight things unless it's global.
The other thing is they're terrified of originals. If it has to be marketed from square one as something that nobody's ever heard of, it is very challenging, especially when you look at the prices of TV advertising these days.
And that's our trailer for the next time we do the show. Let's not talk too much about it.
Absolutely.
How about some great heist actors and actresses?
Well, Sam Jaffe, who was in the Asphalt Jungle, was the only time in his career he was nominated for an Oscar. And he played Doc Riedenschneider, who is, of course, he's such a great character in that movie. He
had a real problem, Steve. He had a real problem when he watched that girl doing the Lindy when he was supposed to be doing his job. He got hooked on a girl.
Late in the movie,
and it wasn't even Marilyn.
Yeah, he was going to make a getaway, and if he didn't stay 2 more minutes, he would have gotten away. No, absolutely.
What happened to Marilyn in the movie? How did she leave that movie?
I think I had mentioned quickly off. You may not have been on that. Lola Albright was who Houston wanted,
right?
The girl from Peter Gunn. And then Marilyn, she couldn't do it. She had a conflict. Marilyn came in, and
I don't mean that though. What I'm saying, I know Lola Albright. Again, Cold Winds in August. Lola Albright was hot.
Herschel Bernardi
was a hot heat. But what I'm saying is, remind me how Marilyn Monroe left the movie. I mean, in the movie, and there was no more Marilyn Monroe. I know the scenes she had, the key scenes. But when was it over? When did she just get out of the movie?
Well, she is in the apartment with the bad guy who plays the lawyer.
Louis Calhern.
Louis Calhern walks into his office and does himself away, and we never see Marilyn again.
That's it. They just cut her right out from that point.
She's done. Now I can turn over the camera to Michael. Michael, it's all yours.
You have reached the end of this episode of the Tales from Hollywoodland podcast. Always remember, we couldn't do this without you. We want to hear from you guys, so please write us at any time at talesfromhollywoodland@gmail.com. Remember, you could also find Tales from Hollywoodland wherever fine podcasts are found, and now you could even find us up on our new YouTube channel at no extra cost. If you made it this far into the episode, why not subscribe and give us a thumbs up? If you're into any social media or anything, please check us out on Instagram and Facebook. Before we get out of here, let's check out what's happening with the guys on their shows next week. Julian, what do you got?
We've got Hal Linden, Barney Miller himself, will be on. And what's so great about Hal Linden, a lot of the public do not know he is a terrific singer. Wow. He's also a great musician. And he won the Tony on Broadway for the Rothschilds.
And clarinet player.
And clarinet and saxophone, both.
Steve, what's cooking up over on Saturday night at the movies?
I have an Academy Award winner on, George Chakiris. We all know him for his Best Supporting Actor Oscar for West Side Story, but we also get into some of his other roles that people don't know as much about. For instance, Kings of the Sun with Yul Brynner, 633 Squadron with Cliff Robertson, and also he was a dance coordinator on The Court Jester back in the day. He was instructing some of the singers. And he also worked on Brigadoon as one of the chorus dancers in Brigadoon.
He was also in a movie with, I think it was Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and the background dancer.
With Marilyn Monroe. Got to work with her on a number of occasions. He was so much fun.
Arthur, what do we got coming up on the podcast, sir?
Well, we're going to talk about the state of the movie business for all of our listeners next week, where we're at, where we've been in this business, and where we're going. That will be interesting even to me. Where is this all going? But that's what it is. It'll be a fun show.
On behalf of Steve, Arthur, and Julian, thanks for listening. This is your producer and announcer, Mike Faber. We'll see you here next time on Tales from Hollywoodland. Your Hollywood adventure starts right here.
Tune in to the DragonCon Report podcast, your ultimate destination for all things DragonCon.
Join us each month as we dive into our home away from home and cover the world of con fandom, cosplay, gaming, and more.
With guests each show, behind-the-scenes insights, tips and tricks, and the latest updates on this year's convention.
Whether you're a seasoned attendee or a first-time explorer,
the DragonCon Report is your passport to the ultimate geek experience.
Join us and let your inner dragon roar.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping at the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.